Good morning. We're about to get started. My name is Lynn Tabersack. I'm a member of the city's 21-member common council. And as a city official, I'm very concerned about Danbury's involvement in the undercover operation of a year ago in Danbury. I know it's not appropriate for municipalities to carry out these kind of warrantless stings. And it really does call into question the mayor's judgment a year ago in authorizing the city's involvement. I know that Chief Alan Baker didn't act alone on this, but Mark Boughton does have a pattern of putting the spotlight onto Danbury for these really hot-button national issues, acting like a candidate for federal or statewide office. But I think in this instance, he actually acted like a two-bit Yahoo cowboy, and in doing that has resulted in exposing the city of Danbury to this legal challenge. Now, I'm not a legal scholar, but I do know that the United States Constitution does apply to every square inch of our country, and that people's civil rights need to be protected even in Danbury. And as a city, we certainly don't want to be arbitrary and capricious. Now, if our plaintiffs do not prevail in this lawsuit, I am willing to eat crow. And I certainly hope the mayor of the city of Danbury will eat crow if our plaintiffs do prevail, as I expect them to. And without further ado, we're going to begin this morning's press conference, and I will be hanging around in the back near the infant.
Could you spell your name and how to spell that, please?
I'm going to give you a card.
Oh, could you say the name? That way all the TV stations get it.
Lynn Tabersack. Taborsak.
Any title, ma'am?
Common Council Member at Large.
Thank you.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for coming. My name is Jerry Greenspan, G-E-R-I Greenspan, and I'm a law student intern at the Jerome and Frank Legal Services Organization in New Haven, Connecticut. I'm one of the law students who are representing the Danbury 11, as they are popularly known, and I've been working on this case since September of last year under the supervision of Attorney Mike Rishke. As you know, we're here to announce a lawsuit challenging the constitutionality of Danbury's immigration enforcement campaign. The plaintiffs are 9 of the men who were arrested in the illegal sting operation conducted by the Danbury police last September. The 10th plaintiff was arrested for a civil immigration infraction by Danbury police in the course of a pretextual traffic stop. I first want to thank Lynn Tabersack very much for helping us to make the logistical arrangements for today, and for her continued support of us and our clients. Before I go into the details of the lawsuit, I would like to allow our client, Juan Barrera, to tell his story. Juan was one of the day laborers who were arrested last September at Kennedy Park, and he's here to explain to you what happened. After he has a chance to speak, I will then come back and explain a little bit more about the lawsuit, and then you will hear from 2 Danbury community activists who will tell you a little bit more about the situation in Danbury. After that, we will have the opportunity for you to ask questions, and then we will be available for one-on-one conversations and interviews after that. So again, thank you all for coming, and I'd like to introduce Juan Barrera.
Mi nombre es Juan Barrera
My name is Juan Barrera.
y estoy aquí para una pequeña entrevista.
I'm here for a little interview.
Eran las 7 de la mañana del 19 de septiembre que me dirigí al Parque Kennedy.
It was the morning of September 19th of last year, and I was at Kennedy Park.
A buscar trabajo.
I was there to look for work.
A lo que llegaba al Parque Kennedy se acerca un auto color gris con un señor.
When I was in Kennedy Park, and a van approached, a gray van, and there was a man inside.
Un señor solicitando personas para trabajar.
He was soliciting people to work.
Entonces yo cojo y dentro del carro 2 compañeros y yo.
So I took the offer and got in the car with two other people, 2 other men.
Entonces nos ofrecieron trabajo y nos fuimos a trabajar.
He offered us work, and we took it, and we went.
La sorpresa de nosotros que el trabajo era cerca, en Danbury mismo.
The surprise was the work was close. It was in Danbury itself.
Pero antes de todo, él nos dijo que vamos a hacer un trabajo a levantar unas fensas.
They told us that we were going to go to tear down a fence.
Llegamos a un edificio, atrás del edificio, una yarda.
We arrived behind the building with a large yard.
Había una construcción y había unas fensas, unas mallas de hierro.
There was construction going on and there were large fences there.
Y nos dijo el Señor, estas fensas hay que levantarlas.
And the man told us, this is the fence that we have to tear down.
Y la sorpresa nosotros cuando bajamos del auto, hubo unos señores que nos agarraron. Yo me sorprendí, me impresioné, o sea, asustadamente, no sabía lo que estaba pasando.
The surprise was when we got out of the van, we were surrounded by a bunch of men, and we were surprised and frightened because we didn't know what was happening.
Entonces procedieron a averiguar todo por nosotros y nos comenzaron a arrestar. No sabíamos, pero ¿por qué?
We didn't know why, but they immediately arrested us and put us in handcuffs. We didn't know what was going on.
Entonces al momento nos esposaron los pies y las manos.
They immediately put handcuffs on us. They put leg irons on us.
Y al rato nos llevaron al departamento de policía de Danbury.
And after a few minutes, they took me and the others to the Danbury Police Department.
Llegando al departamento de policía nos encerraron en un calabozo.
When we arrived at the Danbury Police Department, they put us in a holding cell.
Y a uno por uno nos iban sacando para preguntarnos el nombre y cogernos huellas de todo.
One by one, they took us out of the cell to interview us, to ask us our name, and to take our fingerprints.
Nos tuvieron ahí encerrados en ese calabozo casi como 2 horas.
We were in the holding cell for almost 2 hours.
Y de ahí nos embarcaron en una V y nos trasladaron a Hartford.
From there, they put us in a van and took us to Hartford.
Llegamos a Hartford y nos subieron a una oficina. Ya ahí supe que era la migración, porque ahí nos encerraron en una oficina y nos encerraron en un calabozo también.
When we arrived at Hartford, they took us to what I learned was an immigration office, and they put us again in another holding cell.
Yo quería hacer llamadas para avisar a mi familia, amigos, pero no nos daban acceso para comunicarnos con nadie.
I wanted to use a phone to call my family and my friends and let them know what had happened, but they didn't give us access to a telephone.
Entonces, ya cuando era bien tarde, nos trasladaron a otra prisión.
After we were there for a while, they took us to another prison,
Y ahí pasamos 2 noches.
and we spent 2 nights there.
Y primero en esa cárcel, ahí tuvieron una cárcel, distintos presos que nos encerraron ahí.
And they took us and separated us into separate prison, separate cells.
Pero no sabíamos, pero por qué nos encerraron.
But they didn't tell us why we were being imprisoned.
A las 2 noches que estuvimos ahí, nos trasladaron a Boston.
After 2 nights there, they took us to Boston,
Donde procedieron así mismo a tomarnos nombres y huellas, sin saber por qué.
where they proceeded to do the same thing, taking names and fingerprints, but still not explaining what was going on.
Bueno, la sorpresa que siempre nos trataban con indiferencia, no dejaban salir al baño, no nos daban acceso a comunicación.
They continued to not let us have access to a telephone. We couldn't leave to go to the bathroom, and it wasn't being explained why we were there.
Ya casi a los 5 días me dieron acceso para comunicarme con mi familia.
After 5 days there, they finally let me communicate with my family.
Y yo llamé, mi familia asustada, no sabían dónde estaba, qué me pasaba.
I called my family, and they were surprised and frightened because they had no idea what had happened to me, and they didn't know where I was.
Yo hice la llamada Y mi familia comenzó a preocuparse, a andar y averiguar cómo era la forma de poder salir yo de ahí.
My family, of course, was still worried about me, and you know, we're trying to figure out how they could get me out and what they could do.
Después, a los casi 8 días yo de estar ahí encerrado en una celda, yo no sé por qué me trasladaron a mí en una celda distinta, me tuvieron solo como 4 días, algo injusto que me hicieron.
I was in prison for about 8 days, and about 4 of those days I was in a cell by myself in solitary. They never explained why I was there. The whole thing just seemed unjust. At the end of Mr. Barrera's 8 days in jail, he was, with the help of many community members, was released on bond. And that's why he's able to be here with us today.
Is he reunited with his family?
He's back in Danbury now.
Well, you just heard the story of Juan Barrera, and unfortunately, his story is not unique. He and too many others in Danbury have been caught up in the city's unlawful attempts to enforce federal immigration law. The sting operation last September shows just how far the city is willing to go, and they've gone too far. On the morning of September 19, 2006, the Danbury Police Department, with the assistance of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, staged an undercover sting operation in Kennedy Park that resulted in the arrests of 11 day laborers. 9 of those day laborers are plaintiffs in this lawsuit. They're bringing this suit because the Danbury police arrested them in utter disregard for their constitutional rights, and the ICE officers who were present went along with the plan. On the morning of the 19th, a Danbury police officer went undercover, posing as a contractor. He deceived day laborers at Kennedy Park into thinking he had a job for them. He drove them to a parking lot where they were immediately surrounded, arrested, and placed in police custody. No questions asked. The sting operation was conducted with no specific targets in mind. The undercover officer picked up whomever he could get in the crowd of Latino day laborers. He had no idea of the plaintiffs' names, where they were from, or what their immigration status might be. All he knew was that they were Latino day laborers standing in a place that the city didn't want them to stand. As a result of the arrests, the men were separated from their families, friends, and community, and they were detained, in some cases, for over a month in facilities as far away as Texas. The arrests of the Danbury 11 were illegal for at least 4 reasons, and this is what we allege in the lawsuit. 1, this was an act of racial profiling. 2, the arrests were made without probable cause, and the police didn't even bother to ask a single question that could have provided probable cause. 3, the arrests were in retaliation for the day laborers' visible use of public space at Kennedy Park. And 4, without a formal agreement with ICE, which Danbury does not have, local police lack the authority to make civil immigration arrests. The 10th plaintiff in this lawsuit, Danilo Vargas, was subjected to another immigration enforcement strategy of the Danbury police. While driving to a laundromat one day with his wife, Mr. Vargas was pulled over by a Danbury police officer on a pretext, a supposedly noisy muffler. In reality, the police officer wanted to interrogate him about his immigration status. After running Mr. Vargas's name through the National Crime Information Center database, the police officer eventually arrested him, not for any crime, but for a civil immigration infraction. These incidents are only some examples of the way Danbury officials treat the city's Latino and immigrant residents. Our other speakers can tell you about many more. These actions are both unlawful and unconstitutional. Federal courts across the country have consistently affirmed that only the federal government can enforce federal immigration law. The case of Hazleton, Pennsylvania, which many of you may know about, is perhaps the most well-known example. Moreover, arrests of this kind are bad policy and bad policing. Cities like Danbury have little to gain, but a lot to lose by alienating their immigrant and minority communities. Such policies only drive residents deep into the shadows, making them fearful of government and less willing to cooperate with law enforcement. Ultimately, these policies make it more difficult for local officials and police to keep their cities safe, and this harms everyone. The lawsuit filed today asks the federal court to declare that what happened to these 10 men was illegal and unconstitutional. Again, will be available after everyone has concluded speaking for questions, and I'd be happy to speak in more detail about the lawsuit if anybody would like to know. I would now like to introduce our next speaker, Maria Cintolo, who is a longtime immigrants' rights advocate in Danbury.
Good afternoon. Until March 12 of this year, I was the executive director of the Hispanic Center. I spoke about the rights of the immigrants. I spoke about the abuses that they were perpetrated in this town against the immigrants. And because of that, I was retired. I had to retire 6 months, but I'm not retired from helping the Latino community or anyone that needs assistance, especially if I can help. I was watching last night the news, and in the news they showed President Bush at the United Nations. He was talking about human rights. He was telling the other countries, he was talking especially to Iran, and saying, that we have to enforce human rights. And I thought, with all of these men, in this country, we violate human rights every day. As a matter of fact, we don't have human rights. We don't have rights. We don't have freedom of speech. And we pretend to show other countries and to tell other countries what to do. Here in Danbury, it happens almost every day, the abuse and harassment against immigrants. And their only crime is that they try to do the same thing that previous immigrants when they came to this country to provide for their families. They are not here coming to terrorize, they are not here coming to rob, they are just here coming to provide for their families. So I found it really ironic that we have the top man in the country talking about that, when he doesn't even know what it means, human rights. A few days ago, one of my friends was driving in Danbury. Actually, it was September 7th, and it was in the morning. And we know that in Danbury, we don't have that much Latino police. We know that they're really overworked, but there were about 4 police cars. There were about another 4 how do you call it, without signs, but everybody knows that they were undercover police. It was ICE, and it was a van, and it was 2 men, one of them with his arms in the back, with chains in his ankle, and his ankles and his arms. He is in the middle of the day. We didn't see anything in the paper, because the police that is working very close with the mayor does not inform the newspapers, unless the papers don't want to print it. But I know for a fact that not many people knows what is happening in Danbury. And they find out because people like me that take risks and discovers it, or from people that calls me and tells me, Maria Cinta, that is what is going on. This is happening every day. And we have a mayor that is catering to the most basic needs of some people in the community, that their hate, distrust, bigotry, and he's doing this because eventually he hopes to get elected again. And it's so sad, because these people that they hate so much immigrants, when their forefathers, they were immigrants themselves, they must be very sorry people, very miserable people, very sad people, that they don't have anything better to do than to persecute immigrants that, yeah, they came here, but they are here. We know that the system is broken, but it's not up to the mayor of Danbury or to the police department to fix it. This is up to the high government, and they have to do a better job. I was accused of bringing immigrants to this country. I never did such a thing, but once they are here, I was going to protect and defend them in any way I could. No, I will not defend drug dealers, I will not defend criminals. But human rights, we are all humans have rights. We are all brothers. We speak of a very Christian country, and we don't practice what we say. Because when we persecute our brothers and sisters, when we destroy families, like the family that recently, the parents and two brothers were deported, and the young girl, 17 years old, is left alone. When a child, the mother is deported and left alone, and somebody else has to take care. What are we saying to the world? That we don't care about families, that we don't care, especially if they are immigrants. So what we are doing, the example that we are giving to other countries is horrendous. And they call us hypocrites because we preach, but we don't do what we preach. I didn't prepare a speech because I had what I'm going to say, what I'm going to do. I don't sleep at night because of what happened to me. Many times I really feel depressed because I always thought that in this country a person had rights. A person had the right to speak its mind, and especially for doing the best job that they can do. But as soon as you speak certain things, they are the people that they don't want you to tell the truth. There are a lot of people in this town that they are extremely misinformed, that they're extremely ignorant of the reality. And we have people that they speak with loud voices, and we tell them, oh, the immigrants, they are costing us a lot of money, the immigrants, our taxes go for the immigrants, and the immigrants, they abuse the system, the immigrants all this, the immigrants all that. But in reality, if we were going to wait what they are doing, the benefits and the expenses, the benefits that this town, or for that matter, every place in the country, the benefit that these immigrants provide is tremendous. I hope things change. I hope that today that you're able to, in your papers, in whatever, expose the truth. In Danbury, is still the raids at 5 o'clock in the morning, going to a house, waking up people. This is almost like in Germany, like in countries that the Gestapo was going in the middle of the morning or at night and taking people. We are doing this in this country. Many of us does not know that, because I really believe that if people were more aware of the reality, things like that, they were not allowed. Can I say one more thing? I get caught in all this. One of the things that I wanted to say is that Danbury is a town in fear. People are afraid. Businesses are suffering because people, they only go, and especially the immigrants, they only go where they must go. They don't have the freedom. I think that not to have freedom to move around must be horrible. They don't have freedom. They are afraid, but not only the immigrants. I'm the example for this community. What happened to me, it can happen to other agencies. Agencies that they were to provide services to the whole community, no questions asked. We are all human beings. Now, they don't offer services. Now, they don't collaborate with each other because they are afraid that what happened to me, what happened to the Hispanic Center, that they cut the funding, it can happen to them. So in reality, to live in that fear is a terrible thing. It's a terrible thing. That is the heritage that this mayor is going to leave when we get him out. And it's very sad. So I think that altogether we have to work for improving the relationships of all the agencies, the community, and especially to remove the fear that exists in this town. And our
So you just spell your name?
Yes. Maria Cinta, M-A-R-I-A, capital C-I-N-T-A. That is my first name. My last name is Lowe, L-O-W-E. I was for 17 years the executive director of the Hispanic Center. And if I may say so, I thought, as an advocate, they did an excellent job. And that got me out.
Thank you so much, Maria Cinta. Our last speaker is Franklin Pena, who's a Danbury resident and also an active immigrants' rights advocate.
Good afternoon. I don't have much to say after that beautiful speech that Maria Cintaro had for us. First of all, I'm going to start by apologizing for my broken English. There are problems with the immigration system in this country, in our country. But racial profiling is not going to solve the problem. And the people who run the city are just adding fuel to the fire by violating the constitutional rights of immigrants who live here. The number 21 is a nice and beautiful number right now, because we are living in the 21st century. And as you know, we have somewhere around 21 million new Americans from every corner of this world. And the evidence is clear. Immigrants do more good than harm with the tireless ethic of work and appreciation of freedom that this country has to offer. Don't take me wrong. I agree 100% with the mayor of the city, with the mayor of this beautiful city. We do have an immigration problem. We do have a big problem with the immigration policy. But can we fix the problem here in Danbury? No, we don't. If we intend to put a fence across the border, how can we do that? We don't even have enough laborers to do that job. According to the Washington Times, top executives of Golden Fence, a company from California who was hired by U.S. government, was convicted of hiring workers without proper documentation. To me, the most disturbing aspect of this immigration problem is to think that every worker without proper documentation is a criminal and to be treated like one. Crime is illegal. I agree with that. The potential to commit it, however, is not. Clearly, this country has a great demand for workers. And in order to work, a person has to travel around the city, the country, or the world. So if a person chooses to walk across the street or to step in Kennedy Park, inflicting no physical harm upon another, then he or she has not committed a crime. But a city or a state that visits violence constitutional rights upon immigrants who initiate no violence is acting immorally and must therefore be considered guilty of criminal activity itself. Just by hearing Danbury police, a lot of my friends, they get scared. Supposedly, the police is to help the community. Yet here in Danbury, they're not doing that, or not to us. Not to the people like myself, with dark skin, black hair, in my case, a little bit gray. Even though we might have something like this, it doesn't matter. We are all the same for them. We are illegal, we are criminals, and that's not right. Something has to be done. It's a big shame that big agencies, big organizations from Danbury are not here today. And I hope this fear goes away and we can live in peace. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Franklin. Before we stop for questions, I would like to read a statement of support from UAW Region 9A, who unfortunately couldn't be here today. But they did want me to read the statement. Region 9A of the UAW wishes to express our support for the Danbury 11 and the other plaintiffs in the important civil rights lawsuit filed today. The treatment of Latino and immigrant workers by the city of Danbury, its police, and federal authorities is deplorable, and the facts of this lawsuit show why it has to stop. On that morning, these men were doing nothing more than what millions of other Americans do every day, going to a job where they work hard to make a living. UAW Region 9A stands for workers' rights everywhere and in solidarity with the plaintiffs in this lawsuit. Federal immigration policy is in need of reform, but that doesn't mean that local police and city authorities can make it up as they go along. In doing so, they infringe workers' rights and ruin people's livelihoods. And that's signed by Bob Bedore, Director of UAW Region 9A. It's also included in the press packet.
You taking questions?
Yes, I would first like to introduce my fellow students who have been working on this case as well, and who are all available to answer your questions. Up here is Justin Cox, Rebecca Engel, Tom Ringer, and Michael Tan. When you address questions to Mr. Barrera, we ask please address them to him directly, and then Justin will translate. And also we ask that you not ask any questions about his nationality or his immigration status, because he is in immigration proceedings, and this is something that we've instructed him not to discuss. So if you could just make it a little easier for him by not asking the questions in the first place, we would very much appreciate it.
I have two questions, one for you and one for Mr. Pereira, but let me ask you first. You laid out the reasoning for why what the Danbury PD did was illegal, but what are you seeking in the lawsuit? If their actions were declared unconstitutional, then what?
What we're seeking in the lawsuit is for the judge to declare that what happened was illegal, and to compensate the men with money damages for the harms they suffered. Most of them were detained from anywhere from 2 weeks to over a month. They were shipped off to Texas, some of them. They were traumatized, and for, they suffered in the course of what happened, and so we would hope that they would be compensated for that.
Is there an amount in the lawsuit?
No.
Okay. And I have a question for Mr. Pereira. If come to the microphone so that we can. Okay, is that all right with you? Mr. Pereira, when you're arrested, the police arrest people for criminal behavior. Can you talk about that a little bit, and how you were treated and what you were actually trying to do that day?
¿Puedes hablar un poco sobre cómo estabas tratado ese día que estaba arrestado y lo que estabas tratando de hacer?
El día que me procedieron a arrestar, estaba asustado emocionalmente, no sabía por qué era lo que hacía.
The day that I was arrested, I was surprised at the whole thing, and I didn't understand why they were arresting me, what they were doing.
Me trataron bien mal,
They treated me
psicológicamente.
They treated me poorly, and I feel like they treated me poorly psychologically.
You feel strongly that what you were doing was not criminal. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Another question?
He's not going to answer that?
No. I'm going to start thinking about it.
All right. I have one more question for you. To you or Jerry.
Okay.
I'm not going to ask about his immigration status. You told me not to. But however, in terms of the legal case in general, do constitutional civil rights only apply to U.S. citizens, green card holders, or have courts shown that those rights are also guaranteed for people who are here illegally? I'm talking in general.
No, I understand. Our Constitution, for example, the Equal Protection Clause of our Constitution says all persons shall enjoy equal protection of our laws. And that means every single person who's in this country, it doesn't matter their legal status. The same is true of our Fourth Amendment. All persons shall be free of unreasonable search and seizure. And First Amendment, Congress shall make no law abridging freedom of speech, and that has been interpreted to mean that municipalities also cannot abridge freedom of speech. Our Constitution applies to everyone in this country, regardless of status, regardless of nationality, regardless of race, which is precisely why we're bringing this suit, because we believe strongly that Mr. Pereira and the other plaintiffs in this case were treated differently simply because they were perceived to be non-citizens, and because, to put it bluntly, they're Latino, and we're standing someplace that Danbury officials didn't want to see.
But is there federal precedent for
Absolutely.
people who are here not legally?
This case doesn't matter. The status of our plaintiffs is irrelevant to this suit. The suit is about the wrongful actions of the Danbury Police Department and the ICE agents and the administration of this city.
But you're arguing that your client's rights were violated.
Absolutely.
Are there cases that show folks with similar immigration status to your clients that is there any precedent for guaranteeing
There's
constitutional
precedent
rights to who you're as
Precedents hold that every person in the country is entitled to the same constitutional rights under the Fourth Amendment, Equal Protection Clause, the First Amendment. It's for that reason their status is irrelevant to this case because they are entitled to the protection of the Constitution no matter their status. And actually, it's not even an issue in the lawsuit. The lawsuit is simply about the actions, the wrongful actions of those who arrested them.
A question for Mr. Barrera. You had mentioned that you were unable to talk to your family for at least, was it 5 days? When you finally were able to talk to them, were you able to tell them anything about where you had been?
Sí, yo le comuniqué que yo no sabía por qué era que me habían traído, yo simplemente salí a buscar trabajo.
I was able to tell them that I didn't know why I had been arrested, that I had just gone to look for work.
Ellos me preguntaban, ¿pero por qué te llevaron? Y digo, no sé, no lo entiendo por qué estoy acá.
They asked him, well, why were you picked up? And he said, I don't know. I have no idea why I was picked up.
At what point did he find out why he was picked up?
Ya yo vine a saber a los 8 días. A los 8 días vine a saber porque me dijeron que ha sido prohibido ahí estar parado.
For you, could you speak like as you're not? Don't say he. Just say I.
Okay. I learned after the 8 days that I was in jail. Why I'd been arrested.
So at no point before that did any Danbury police officer or ICE officer ask him about his status?
Antes de salir de la cárcel, alguien te preguntó sobre tu estatus. Alguien te dijo por qué estabas arrestado.
No sabía.
No one told him why he had been arrested.
Were you also advising him in there?
Yes.
Okay. So at no point, did he ever see a Homeland Security or ICE identification or T-shirt or anything like that on any of the officers?
Yo no me di cuenta de nada porque era todo rápido.
I didn't realize what was going on because everything was too fast.
Did it ever occur to him that his status was the reason why he was detained?
I'm going to instruct him not to answer that.
I just had a question through your investigations. Did ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, just decide to come down to do a sting in Danbury? Were they invited down by, were they asked to come down by the police department, the mayor?
Well, our understanding is that the planning of this operation was that of the Danbury Police Department. Through our FOIA litigation, we've learned that the individual driving the vehicle was a Danbury police officer. And we believe there were more Danbury police officers on site than there were ICE agents. And it appears as though, you know, statements from Danbury officials to the contrary, it appears as though they planned and executed this operation. That is what we've learned from our FOIA litigation. And the ICE agents were on site, were in the parking lot where the men were arrested, and witnessed the arrests without probable cause and everything else, and then eventually took custody of the men. But this, by all indications, was a Danbury police operation. Justin Cox, COX.
Another question, Kevin? It's two parts. Have these actions made it more difficult for people you know to work? And if so, what has the impact been on them and their families?
¿Cuál es el impacto en la gente que tú conoces?
Bueno, emocionalmente está muy difícil la situación para mis compañeros, para mí también.
Emotionally, it's very difficult for my friends and for me as well. Other questions?
Back in December, when you filed the FOI suit, Mayor Bowden on Channel 8 and on Channel 30 stated that Danbury police played no part in the raid. When did you find out that the Danbury police officer was driving the van?
When did we find that out?
What time? This was, I think if I'm correct, Mayor Bowden made these statements back in December. When did you find out?
Right. Yeah. We found out in, what was it, perhaps April? That's right. So actually, we've learned this in the immigration proceedings where we're seeking to suppress the unlawfully obtained evidence. The government, in their brief that they submitted to the court, actually said that it was a Danbury police officer driving the van. And so, according to ICE, it was a Danbury operation.
Besides the person driving that van, were there any other officers, Danbury police officers, involved in the raid, and if so, how?
Absolutely. They were in the parking lot when the men were arrested and were among those who surrounded the men at the parking lot and arrested them. They are named as defendants in this suit because of the actions that they did.
Just for a little context and background here, this is after Mayor Bowden had sought to have the police authorization to enforce immigration laws. It was told by the state government or the federal government that the state government that they could not do that.
That's right.
So if what you're saying is true, if the involvement of Danbury police officers is what you're saying it is, does that violate state law, federal law,
Well, it violates,
what does that show?
It violates the Fourth Amendment because it means they didn't have the authority to make the arrest that they carried out. And that's what we're alleging in this complaint. You're absolutely right that the mayor has sought the authorization. Actually, he wanted to have state officers, state troopers deputized to this memorandum of understanding, and was denied. The governor of Connecticut, Joe Urell, decided that it was bad policy. And so you're absolutely right that the mayor knows and the police chief knows how one would go about enforcing civil immigration law at the local level, and it's only through this memorandum of understanding. And yet they decided, for whatever reason, to do it anyway, which is why we're being sued.
But what kind of consequences? I mean, this is, I know that you've got clients here, but if this is true, Is that action, I mean, should there be an investigation by the federal Justice Department or some state entity into this action? Or is your lawsuit just focused on what happened to these individuals? Or are you looking to try to, I don't know, stop this practice in general? And how would you go about doing that?
Well, right now, we obviously only represent our plaintiffs. Of course, we do hope that this leads to a broader discussion in Danbury and elsewhere about immigrants' rights and how municipalities can better treat them and integrate them into their communities. And we would, of course, welcome that conversation to start in Danbury, because we don't think it has started yet. But our primary allegiance is to our clients, and that's who we represent.
The government claims that it was common knowledge that undocumented workers waited at Kennedy Park to be picked up, and that gave them enough reason. What's your response to that?
Actually, I believe the government has claimed that there was common knowledge that there were individuals with old removal orders who hung out at Kennedy Park, who were what are known as absconders. I think that it's noteworthy that they didn't pick up a single absconder on September 19th when they went to carry out this sting operation. And if it's such common knowledge, what is the basis for that? Common knowledge, it seems, can be sort of interchanged here with, popularly held beliefs or prejudicial beliefs or any number of other things. We've yet to see any evidence whatsoever that is actually a commonly held factual belief.
Quick question for your client. What does he think the contributions of his community, which have been mentioned before, what are the contributions of his community to the city of Danbury?
Bueno, la comodidad de estar aquí en esta ciudad está bien. Bueno, el trabajo emocionalmente está muy difícil de encontrar.
Said the community here is strong, and it's been very hard to emotionally to continue to look for work, but the community is strong.
Last question for me. You have here on a quote of Mr. Barrera saying, "They treated me like a violent criminal. All I was trying to do was find work." Could you possibly say, that's what I was trying to get at before, I need that for radio. Sorry to be so blunt about it, but if that's the way you're feeling, Mr. Barrera, I wondered if you could express that.
Sí, yo me sentía como que estaba como un criminal porque estaba encerrado igual con demás presos que de diferente calaña, algo así. No sabía por qué.
I feel like I was treated like an animal. I was put in prison with any other criminal, and I just didn't understand why.
One more. Has the mayor clarified a statement that he made in December?
Not to our knowledge, no.
No.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
We'll be sticking around, so if you would like to speak to any of us.
Now you're a little trouble. When the mayor's done,